listening to The Switch. The Switch is a podcast about ideas and experiences that change our minds. I'm Chase Harris, joined as always by my co-host, Alex Berner. In this episode, we speak with Christian Matyi. Christian is the host of the podcast The Big Inside. He is also the CEO of Scorpio Creative and a regular advisor to Mojo Filter Media. He does a bunch of other stuff, but we'll let him explain in the interview. In this conversation, we talk about the philosophy of trying to find answers, curiosity, and open-mindedness.
If you like what we do here on The Switch, the best way to support us is through Patreon. For as little as $1, you can become part of the community, ask us questions, suggest topics, and directly communicate with us. You can also unlock bonus content like extra questions we ask our guests. If you want more of The Switch, both on topic and off, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/switch_podcast.
You can also support us by rating and reviewing on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to this podcast. If you want to connect with us on social media, we're on Instagram and Twitter at @switch_podcast, and on Facebook, we are The Switch Podcast.
The Switch is produced by Mojo Filter Media, a company specializing in audio production for video games and interactive media. You can check out our website at www.mojofilter.media.
So, without further delay, our conversation with Christian Matyi.
This is going to be, guys, all right, do what you have to do. This is going to be your worst episode. All right, here we go. Everyone else is probably like, hello, my name is Beverly Michaels, and I've been a professor at Columbia for 4 years. And I'm here like, I'm doing receipts. All right, here we go.
Actually, you know what? That's a better intro than I could have ever given. So we're going to call that the start and say, Christian, welcome to The Switch.
Her name was Dr. Beverly Michaels from Columbia University. I study humanities. Thank you. Thank you, Chase and Alex. Do I go Alex and Chase or Chase and Alex?
Alex and Chase.
Let's do Alex and Chase, because Chase and Alex sounds like a cutesy indie flick about, like, you know, a lesbian who decides to go straight.
So
can we do that? Is it PC? Are we PC or are we good?
No, we're good.
Right.
We just put a little E by the podcast and we're
for
good.
Our listeners, do the E. For our listeners, I just want to say up front, I do the comedy haha yuck jokes. So please, if anything I say offends or disrupts, I want you to write a strongly worded letter to Chase Harris and directly to him, as long and as angry as you can, very vitriolic, because the jokes are all his responsibility and reflect his views exclusively.
All right, and with that
welcome to The Switch and Doodle. With The Switch? Here we go.
So before we get into the main topic, which we're basically going to be talking about the philosophy of changing your mind, Christian, I just want to get some background on you. Who are you? Where did you come from? Give us your story.
Well, I'm currently shirtless and sweating balls while drinking iced tea in Boston, Massachusetts. I am. Is that good? Or you can edit that out. Actually, so I'm one of those types of people who is a kind person would say I'm of the personality of multi-mastery. But what that really just means is I'm a jack of all trades, a multivalent creative. Currently, career-wise, I'm sort of stretched between a couple things where I'm primarily in branding and design and marketing. But my background at Carnegie Mellon University, that's my first name drop. At Carnegie Mellon University was in creative writing and cultural and literary theory. So that pretty much equips you to be the best damn waiter in the world. I'm not a waiter, but that's what it equips you for. I also am a coach. I'm a poet. I'm a performance poet, and generally speaking, I say that my art is actually the art of oratory. So while I do write, for me, my main art is oratory, whether it's spoken word poetry, whether it's storytelling. I have a podcast, thebiginside.com. I'm going to keep saying that the whole episode and plug it wherever I can, thebiginside.com. But from there, that storytelling and all that other stuff swirled together to where I'm also a coach. I don't like to say life coach, but I also hate to say a coach in physique sports, because I sort of, and we'll probably talk about this, reside in some weird hybrid zone that doesn't exist. I'm literally, I would say that as far as coaching, I'm sort of like a platypus branch of that family tree. I'm really something that's not going to go extinct unless everyone kills them. It's like this weird offshoot of coaching.
Yeah.
I only adopted the word coach because I lacked any other mentorship word that really covered the spectrum. I don't love the word coach, but I'm not a professor and I'm not necessarily a teacher with academic credentials. So that's where that is. So that's a whole spread of sort of career stuff. I still entertain. I mean, I work a few part-time gigs because, I live in one of America's most expensive cities of Boston, Massachusetts, where I grew up here. I grew up in a sort of, gilded upper middle class existence that I didn't realize was gilded until I moved out, kind of thing. So that's sort of a broad spectrum of who and what I am. I am, get this is probably something your listeners will be very surprised. This is probably the first real dead shocker. I'm a white man raised upper middle class with a college education on a podcast. Very rare. You never see that, do you? Never see that. That shit's rare right there. Men are fun. All right.
So that's fairly.
Oh, also I am
descriptive.
This is, I think, important as well, because I do, both in my comedy as well as my storytelling, I do veer into political topics. I would consider myself politically rather radical. I'm not quite anarchistic, but that's relevant to all of this because while I primarily work in charity and charitable work and sort of sociological work, when it veers toward political, it's always with a political slant, and that sort of informs a lot of the work I do in marketing and branding and in my comedy and my performance and whatnot. So I thought that was probably apropos to this moment.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to make clear is that, while our main topic is not necessarily political, you and I have political disagreements. We have some area that we share. And we do. And if you want,
we'll have to follow that up later. Yeah,
I was going to say later we can totally get into some politics. We can totally get into some of the implications.
But if it gets there, I'll go there.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make it clear that was not off the table.
Yeah. Oh no, nothing's off the table. Yeah, definitely.
But give me a sense of like Little Christian. Where did Little Christian come from, and how did you become sort of who you are, especially in terms of sort of the richness of the way that you go about finding new ideas and conveying ideas to people? Because the reason that Alex and I invited you on, and the reason that it's been a little haphazard in the way that we're conducting this, is we both said we have to have Christian on, and then we looked at each other and went, wait a minute, what do we talk about? both of us went, he's had such a big impact in our lives, but it's in all these little ways. There's no way we can just pinpoint like this one banner of like, Christian changed my mind about this. So
clearly not politics. And also, that was the nicest compliment I've ever gotten with a dick pun worked right in there. That Little Christian and that guy. I'm simultaneously flattered and hanging back on really dirty humor right now. So you've done a good job introducing me, Chase.
But I want to get a sense of how you came to be. So where did go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess the reason I made that comment about like dick humor, and as your listeners plummet as I keep saying the words dick humor, but as I was saying, like the reason I said that is because as you were talking, I immediately thought of, when you talk about where does Little Christian come from, one of the things is a lot of people fucking die. People just die everywhere, okay? And I've had a lot of death around me, not necessarily traumatic death like gunshots and fire, but I've had a lot of people die. My family has used humor as a means to get through stress, as a means to get through strife. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm always sort of like spontaneously, when I'm nervous or when I'm, trying to ruin someone's podcast, I always go right to the joke. It's usually for me, it's a way to keep out, it's a way to push out, it's a way to make breathing room and distance, because I think that it's very easy to over-personalize, it's very easy to over-dramatize, it's very easy to what's happening around me to make all about me. Humor, that equation of like distance plus time equals humor, or maybe it's distance times time, or I don't know. I'm not great at math, but how humor by its very merit forces a gap in your thinking and forces space away. And that gap is a very fertile space. It can be filled with almost anything because it starts out as a vacuum. And so that's one thing to know about me, is that the little Christian, or the background of me, is that I have been around. I've experienced, death in all kinds of ways. And we'll probably talk about that. So the idea of humor, and especially as, the result of having tragedy around me, having pain around me, is a lot of what little Christian was groomed on. I think the story that you were sort of teeing me up for was a story that forms me for most of my life, which is a not funny story. So I'll try to keep it quick. It's kind of a boring story. So my parents were Catholic. Both of them were Catholic. And that probably wins a lot of rancor from the, podcast community because, goddamn religion, capitalism hasn't done anything to hurt the world, but oh, those Catholics are terrible. And I'm not Catholic at all, but it's this, it's a notion that people's knee jerk when they hear religion, especially, in today's climate of quickly pick a side on an issue. Religion bad, religion ignorant, religion false. And there's nothing that could ever come of it, and I don't care, and blah, blah, blah. And that's sort of, that vitriolic spin has been a little bit annoying to me, because while I'm not Catholic, I don't consider myself religious. Not like some sort of dyed-in-the-wool atheist by any stretch, but, I grew up with an accidentally awesome Catholic, my father. I'm not putting him on a pedestal. This guy had a bunch of problems, like we all got problems. And, I'm not going to sit here and, dick on my dead dad, but I could. And what I will say is that his spin on his Catholic upbringing, which was raised from having a highly abusive family, from experiencing a lot of death around him, and from, nearly poverty levels of upbringing, the Catholicism entered his life in terms of he got lucked out as well. So he was actually introduced to the idea that Catholicism is, first and foremost, above all else, charitable compassion for every other person, even and maybe especially and aggressively the people who you frickin' hate. Even and especially. And that's the key thing there. So he had this weird upbringing, this take on Catholicism that had this charitable notion. It wasn't deeply connected to the Pope and to all the mythology. And he bought into it, and, talking snakes and fires, breathing dragons, whatever happens, in that book. But I don't think there are actually any dragons. There might be, but it's been a while. But that generosity of spirit is what sort of raised me. The reason I'm giving this background of the Catholicism is because it definitely influenced the idea of personal morality from a very young age. And it created the backbone to the story that I was going to tell 3 minutes ago, which was the family. We weren't quite 52 out of 52. We didn't go to church every weekend, but it was almost 52. Like the effort was 52 to 52. So, and so I'd probably say we were like a 46 out of 52 family. Probably actually some years 52 out of 52. And that's what you did on Sunday morning. You just went to church, and sometimes, or if not, then Saturday night because you wanted your Sunday off. But that was just what it was. And so I was the youngest of 4 kids. And I sort of say a loosely extended family because there were cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff like that all throughout my life. But, the core was the 4 kids and getting the kids ready. And I was about 3, I believe, maybe 4, maybe 2, 3, I'm going to guess. And my mother's getting me ready. And I was always, I think, innately contrary in a lot of ways. And I, didn't want to go, what are we doing? Where are we going? Why are we going there? We're going to church. Well, why are we going to church? So I have to go. Yes, you have to go to church. We have to go to church because we're going to see God. Why are we going to go see God? Because we believe in God and God loves us and all that. Like my mother's she's just trying to get a damn tie on a 3-year-old, and she's just answering whatever she can. And I'm like, oh, but Mom, I wanted to. Why do we have to go? And why church? Well, because that's where God lives. Well, why does God live there? Because that's where God's is. And she's just like winging it now. She's just throwing theology up in the air. Doesn't know what she's saying because she's got 4 kids to get into a car, and the youngest one's being a pain in the ass. And she's just answering the questions as rapid fire because a child will ask a million questions. And so house and child brain come to this house. No, because God's in church. Why is God in church? Because that's where he is. And so I said, so God's not here? She said, no, of course God's here. And then the child logic kicks in. Well, wait a minute, if we're going to church and God's there and God's here, where's God? Well, God's everywhere. And then child logic kicks in hard. Well, is he in the tie? Of course he's in your tie. Is he in the doorknob? Of course he's in your doorknob. Is he in the bathroom? Of course he's in the bathroom. And now she's losing her patience. And for the rest of the day, probably weekend, I was like, everything is God in the grilled cheese. Yes, God is God in the cup. Yes, is God in the, like, it's like, yes, fucking God is but I wanted to test every single point to find that truth. Is God in everything? That's all I had as a 3-year-old child. This idea that, and so I wanted to, the toothpick, yes, in the car, yes, in the wheels, yes, in this blade of grass. And it was a baffling thing because I was trying to figure out what that even meant. That's a high concept thing for a 3-year-old. But it started an obsession of this, like, is this in this kind of obsession? And the obsession really wasn't about God or religion or anything like that. It was about, well, what's the damn truth here? Because that's really what this kid was getting. What's the damn truth? I just want the damn truth. My mother's fielding the balls as best she can, but now she's in a tangling match with a child's brain, and you're never going to win one of those. And that idea, is God in the bureau? Yes. Is God in my socks? Yes. Is God in my shoes? Yes. That idea was about trying to find truth, and I didn't know that at the time. But it sort of became sort of my own personal allegory about finding truth and understanding truth, and that process is destructive, but not necessarily devastatingly destructive. And I think when people hear a destructive process, they think, there's different types of destruction. You could destroy something and leave nothing behind, totally devastate it. Or you can backwards engineer it, which technically destroys it from what it was, but elementally, you could still maybe reassemble or at least backtrack to that original thing. And I think that's what that child was doing, that little Christian was doing. And that's sort of the description of how my brain works now, and whether it started working that way at that moment because of that very incidental moment, or I was destined to be like that, I don't know. That's where we can go back and the atheist can have at it. But I do know that that's where that started working in me, is finding truth is this strangely destructive process. It's what I call the vase conundrum. If I held up a vase and I said, Chase, what is this? You'd be like, it's a vase. And I say, no, it's not, it's sand. And you say, no, Christian, it's a vase. And I'd say, no, it's sand. And I'd smash it. I say, see, look at that. And you say, no, those are just parts of a vase. And say, no, it's sand. And you say, no, it's parts of a vase. And I take those parts and I smash them again. You say, those are, shards of glass. And I say, no, it's sand. You say, no, those are shards of glass. And I smash them again. You say, those are splinters of glass. And I could keep doing this and keep smashing it. And eventually I'd smash it so much, it'd be powder. And you say, that's sand. And I'd say, see, I told you, it's sand. It was sand all along. Mm-hmm. Now, we were both right. It's like the Schrodinger's vase. We were both right. It was both a vase and it was sand at the same time. And I'm assuming we have a highly educated listenership and they can look up Schrodinger.
We actually just did an episode on quantum computing. So
So the listeners who haven't left this show know exactly what I'm talking about with this vase. And I call it the vase conundrum because it's like, how do I approach a thing? That's where the conundrum comes in. Do I treat things like it's sand at its truth level, or do I treat things like a vase at its functional or as its operative level? And that's really a conundrum because that's another thing of like, how do I find the truth in that? Like, what's the truth? Is there a rule? Would it be untruthful to set a rule? So it's truly a conundrum. I never know how to approach something. I don't think I ever will. I don't think I ever should. I kind of slough that part of it off. But in the moment, you come across the vase conundrum in everything you do. Yeah. Do I read, let's go back to this religious thing. Do I read the Bible as truth, or do I read it as symbolism, or do I just read it as some funny thing that was written? Like, what is where is the sand versus vase in that thing? This way of thinking has guided all my work. I've often said, if there was a dharma to me, it's about revealing and describing truth, or maybe promoting truth. Not that I'm like I tell lies left and right, this is a great podcast. And, sorry, no, it is. Wow, he's going dark. No, but, seriously, the idea that it's, that I'm talking about is more about the crust for like the primary element. What some funky, very spiritual person once said that, oh, you're a sorcerer because you go to the source of things, which is totally not the etymology of sorcerer, but I do like that idea. Sure. That I'm sourcing things, trying to find their sources or their essences or their whatever. And that's how I see the world. So for example, with writing or with speech, it's one of the reasons why I sometimes love the rhythm of words more than the meaning of words, which is why I'm notorious for my ridiculous typos, because I will be going so fast on a rhythm that I won't be paying attention to the grammar or tech or spelling. I'll be hearing the rhythm in my head and I'll be searching out that music. And then I have to, certainly go back. And that's why when people correct me in my grammar, for example, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That's wrong. I don't get a bit pissy about it. I'm like, yeah, it's 100% wrong, because that wasn't I get that. That wasn't the essence of like why I was writing it to begin with. So really it was in that story, that truth thing, where the storytelling began for me, is trying to find truths and things. So that's sort of like the little Christian thing. That was sort of the dharmic thing. It spills over into developmental things like, becoming a queer person, that's actually a good vase conundrum right there. I tell people I'm queer. I actually had this conversation with someone just not but a day ago. I choose queer not out of some like fancy political, like, look at me, how clever I am. But out of, it's the most truthful thing I could use to describe my sexuality. If I broke my leg, I'd need a doctor. So I look for the person who labels himself doctor. Okay. And everyone knows that's how labels work when they're useful in society. So the whole notion of, and we don't have to get into this, but the history of how labeling our sexual identity and gender identity is a very new, gender identity, no, that goes far back. So I shouldn't say that. That's like thousands of years. But the whole sexual identifier as a social commodity, very new concept for human beings. And evolving social policies and social ideas around this very, very new concept that most young people are like, but it's the truth of who we are. And I'm like, well, then how come we haven't come across it sooner? And it could be, that's what I'm saying, there's the conundrum. Maybe it's simply because we didn't have and I do mean this literally, the technology to study the sociology enough to do so, the data banks or whatever to do so, or maybe it's just a construct that we made up. Who knows, right? History will tell us this. But the point is that the word gay at this point in pop culture is so mired in a whole set of mores, attitudes, dispositions, physical presentations, codified gender. It's so mired in everything other than what I want to kiss and who I want to love and where I want to put my junk, that it really brings with it far more baggage than it does to describe me. So it's kind of like that douchebag who just, studied, whatever, landscaping and isn't somehow got a PhD in it, and then walks around saying, I'm Dr. I'm Dr. Beverly Michaels, from Columbia University. And it's like, and they're not a doctor. Like, I broke my leg, I need a doctor. And not that they shouldn't put doctor in their formal documents or official documents, but when they walk around asking everyone to call them doctor, it's sort of bringing with it a whole other level of baggage and noise.
Yeah.
Outside of the realm of what we're trying to transact as I need a doctor, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now
there's an episode of Friends about that.
Right.
Ross in Friends is a paleontologist,
right.
But he's Dr. Geller. And,
precisely.
Yeah. Anyway.
Precisely. So, and not that I think that, and that's what I mean. So how we use doctor in what context, I think, is important. I think that out in like everyday walking around context, it's sort of a social norm for the medical doctors to identify themselves as doctors out in the real world, because it's actually socially useful, rather than like, say, I'm, doctor of, ink printing or something, which you get all the credit in the world to you.
Yeah.
But you might not want to walk into like, a place where someone might get hurt and say, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think I may be speaking out of line. So please, listeners, again, write your vitriolic, angry letters directly to Chase Harris of The Switch. But the reason I was going off on that small tangent is to sort of say, with queer, the same thing happens. Queer is not quite as mired. It's beginning to get there, but as a word, it's not quite as mired as when you say gay. The minute you say gay, it's like, queer eye for the straight guy, and you do, your pecs must be great, and all this other crap, that goes with it. That may be true for a vast minority. And also, when you say gay, it means, oh, so you're not black? Great. It's mired in this white male, upper middle class, urban idea of pop culture, expendable income nonsense, and blah, 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 blah. And, it's it's sort of understood, wink, wink, that it doesn't really mean that. We get it. It doesn't really. And yeah, so the casual use of it doesn't offend me. Okay, yeah, because I get that most people get that. But if you're going to ask me who I am, I'm going to give you the sand, not the vase, and say, look, I'm queer. Why? Because I know I don't fit into normative heterosexual pop culture stuff. And I know I don't fit into normative gay pop culture stuff. And don't fit in not just slightly, but radically to the point where it's like, no, I'm queer. I'm pretty much queer to anything you think, So there you go. Like, so it tells you where I'm sitting on any spectrum or Venn diagram. I'm really an ill-fitted person when it comes to how I partner. Ironically, in the relationship itself, I might be utterly normative, and probably am. I think I'm totally normative. But how I court, who I'm attracted to, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't fit into neatly. Oh, you're gay? You must use, apps to get laid. Like, I didn't say that, but I'm glad that you're immediately reading into that.
So, and I think this may just be a consequence of, the difference in who we're interacting with, and obviously, how people treat us differently.
Sure.
But, as somebody sort of on the other side of things, when I hear the term gay, I actually don't necessarily ascribe all of those extra things to it. And
are you calling me extra?
No. I'm just trying to say that I think that your perception of the baggage that comes along with the term gay may be true in the context in which you've experienced people using that term, but I don't think it's true in all contexts. And I think specifically, for me personally, when I hear that term or when I use the term gay, I don't think all of that baggage is there. There may be bits and pieces of it, but I don't know.
Sure. I think are you saying you just discovered that social terms are not accurate across all people? Whoa,
No, of course,
Chase, of course, dude. I mean, what you just said is, it's like, I don't think the sky's always blue. I get it. The sometimes it's sort of a pale wan gray.
Well, but I'm not actually saying like not all. I think what I'm actually saying is,
well, what it is that I think I hear you. I'm giving you a hard time. That as a queer person, I will hear a higher frequency of messages, you know what I mean,
right,
than you might hear. Okay. You're someone who, whether you're normative or not, because you have, say, normative sexual or relationship interests, sort of cisgender, blah, 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 you can kind of, you may not get the same rate of input even into what that word might mean, to where your construct might even, you literally just maybe not even getting near the places where that baggage would even enter the word, or you're just not hearing it frequently enough to know that there is baggage, or maybe there isn't baggage. Like, yeah, all these are possible. That's what I mean by trying to find that truth, is hammering it. Like, we will not know, but that's that's what drives. Literally right now I'm getting animated. I mean, if this was a video, you'd see this crazy shirtless guy with a beard drinking iced tea getting animated. Because that essence, that's exactly what drives every aspect of work and creation.
Right.
And when that's not there, I deflate. I become like a blah. I just can't even, it's almost hard. If people say, what gets you out of bed? I'm saying when that's not there, that essence of what is the truth of this, it's almost hard for me to just even move. Like, forget the bed. I can't even, like, wherever I ended up is where I'll stay, because I can't even generate energy unless there is that chase of, well, what is it? Which one of these three options that I just laid out? And maybe it's 5 options and I've missed 2. That's fascinating to me. That's life. That's where life lives for me. I look around me. It often seems like that's where life happens for everyone. Again, let me go back to the original thing. That's probably one of the reasons why humor has always been such a precious thing of mine. Because once you make that gap vacuum, you might even spot an option you didn't spot before, because you made such a vacuum. And sorry, I didn't turn my phone off. See, there's the truth. Sirens are going by and everything's going on. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why humor, I think, has something for me, because while humor rarely delivers the hard truth, it gaps you. It creates a distance, and in that vacuum, it's going to fill quickly. Like when you scoop out sand from the ocean, the tide's going to come and fill it up quickly. But you could reshape the shore at that moment. You could reshape where you stand at that moment. that little thing you dug out could be everything. It could reveal a crab for all you. You didn't even think, you weren't even looking for crabs. And we got crabs. And so it's that idea that that's why the truth is such a great tool, because for me it's a very gentle crowbar. It's a great screwdriver to dismantle something a little bit, and maybe get closer to even things I won't ever know. I know that I won't ever know these final truths. I'm utterly convinced of that. That doesn't plague me or cause me any anxiety. People often say you're constantly challenging with questions. What if you don't get any answers? And I do mean people often confront me with that. And I'm like, well, whatever. Then I'll die. I mean, do you not know the end of the story? It's okay. So, but in the meantime, I might have created those gaps where truths may have snuck out that otherwise might not have snuck out, which really is what I mean by I get motivated. I get agitated. I want to create that gap. Is God in the dresser? Is God in the door? It's like, really, like, how do I create enough gap to figure that out?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the things that I gained the most from, our interaction.
And we should talk about that and what that interaction was, but you can keep talking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so basically you were whatever that was called, a life coach, physique, sports coach.
I was,
friend, is this kind of
meddlesome do-gooder. No, just kidding.
Yeah. And for me and the other people that were, may I couch that? So the program I run, which isn't totally dead, but it's a huge sabbatical point. It's a coaching program called the Phys Academy. There's a specific program called the Next Level, which I never liked the name, which is why Phys Academy is the thing that prevails. And what it is, it was basically, I had a theory that people will, at a point of mastery or a point of experience, I won't even say mastery, at a point of experience with any practice, human beings begin to learn better, i.e. find more truth in that practice when they operate in a peer structure as opposed to, a master teaching a pupil structure. And I'm not saying anything radical. That's literally how all education works. That's the only radicalization of it was to take people outside of the academic context in an arena called of physique aesthetics and apply it there, which just doesn't happen. That doesn't even occur. So the only radical thing was the location of this thing that otherwise works everywhere. That's where, just so the audience knows, that's where I was coaching Alex. He was on a team in this program. Sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want, because it's a little amorphous until you ground it like that, A bunch of big muscular guys meeting once, twice a week, sometimes talking about diet, other times talking about high concept philosophy, Yeah. And one of the things that you said, we're just saying was dismantling your version of the truth kind of, and trying to further question it. And I think that's something that, the age that a lot of us were, early 20s up to maybe, 30, mid 30s, that's kind of, I feel like, where a lot of people get solidified in their version of the truth, where it starts to become, set in stone. And I feel like,
or at least reliable.
Yeah, exactly. But you helped me to dig deeper and look at those things that I viewed to be true and analyze them from a different way, whether it was linguistically or historically, and try to break stuff down and understand it from different perspectives. And the same with people, I think.
Interesting.
So
what,
it didn't have much to do with, physique or lifting, but those are the kind of takeaways that I think a lot of us had. And like Chase and I were saying, we weren't sure exactly what to bring you on for, because these are little things that add up to really helping to make my worldview, I would say, more examined.
Well, and that may be it. Is that maybe what we're circling around here, guys? Look, I'm helping you find the topic to your show as we're in the topic to the show. What I was hearing was the analogous. That basically, look, I'm a storyteller, right? You can couch me that way. For this episode, couch me that way. And all these other things flow out of that. I'll take another name another time. But the most sand-like we'll get for this is storyteller, okay? And when you're telling a story, I'm talking to Alex and Chase. Now, I could tell a story about this young, poverty-stricken African girl who goes off to fight, mythical griffins, and then ends up developing wings. And none of that would relate to you. Or I could tell the story of two young princes who were both trying to develop kingdoms of their own. And you know that the latter story, even though it's not as exotic, might resonate a little more because it's a little more analogy to where you guys are. And there's something in the art of telling a joke or a story or branding something that if you can figure out thematically what would be the most analogous story to tell, you might get the person to think about the details of their own story as they're contemplating the details of that analogous story, which is really what the next level, that program in Phys Academy was. These guys were in love with bodybuilding, in love with the gym, in love with all this stuff, with machismo, with all the imagery and all of that. That's a narrative. Well, they probably have stuff in their personal space that must be analogous, or else they wouldn't be resonating so deeply with these pursuits. So I always thought, well, let's deconstruct that a little. Let's rather than deconstruct the individual, we'll deconstruct the bodybuilding and then deconstruct their love of the body. And pretty soon they're going to see the analogies for themselves. You don't got to, at that point, you don't got to do anything. They'll just see it, horse to water kind of thing. So really, I think that's where a lot of our relationship, all three of us, with me, with Chase, with you, Alex, and Next Level, certainly with both with coaching, with marketing projects, it's this idea of creating an analogy to maybe uncover elements of truth that might have otherwise been either overlooked, unperceivable until they're put into this context, and that's what sort of shifts the thinking. Is because the minute I see something that I didn't know I couldn't see, is the minute I have to sort of rethink everything else that I already have seen. Like suddenly everything, it's a quantum. It's a quantum. Now, sometimes as you go through that quantum reassessment, 99% of it stays the same, and huzzah. But usually it'll be a quantum where like everything gets a little nudge, everything shifts a little bit. So let me ground this because I'm really up in the stratosphere here. One of the things, and I've always been very open about, is I've been in recovery for a million years, like 12-step recovery, right? And as far as addiction is concerned, there are certain codas of behavior that you evolve and develop while in your active addiction that you don't even realize that you have, because it's just in the flow of what would be your everyday behavior. Now, the minute you begin realizing, oh my God, I have an addictive pattern, certainly all the addictive behaviors come into view and you see them differently. And that's that little bit that you didn't see before. But then it becomes quantum and you realize, oh my God, the way I go to the supermarket is wrapped up in this coda of behavior. And I never thought the way I went to the supermarket was even relevant, let alone was being influenced or skewed by this other psychological disease that I have. And I am totally DSM-6. I'm like all about, addiction is a mental disease, and it is something that, is diagnostically, gravitas, even though there are people outside of the academic field and outside the field of science who are like, nah, it's not real, and global warming's a myth and all that crap. But to that end, I'm just saying that, that if you have that sort of like that mental disease or any mental disease, and you didn't have a consciousness and then suddenly got a consciousness, you'll suddenly realize, wow, that little disease created behavior patterns in how I read a book and how I talk to my mom and how I, butter my bread. And I didn't realize that because it was just part of the original flow. And that's like, for example, if you ever had to raise an animal or grow a plant, the weird changes you have to make in your behavior around that object suddenly may reveal, oh my God, I drop food all the time because my cat has been coughing up like jelly bellies for weeks and I never knew how much. I'm just a pig. And you suddenly may have to quantum change how you clean, which then makes you say, oh my God, and I don't organize my drawers correctly because I can never find the goddamn Clorox wipes. And you suddenly have this weird quantum that's seeping its way into all kinds of things, including, wow, I actually need an alarm clock because I've been early for work every time this stupid idiot cat climbs on my face and farts in my mouth or whatever cats do. I don't know, cat. It's quantum. And those are like, I'm using petty examples just to create the analogy to what we're talking about. But everything we're doing around us has some sort of analogous impact. And the more we find something interesting, fascinating, exciting, curious, whatever, hold that word curious aloft for a minute because I'm coming back to that, the more likely that we could use that pursuit to create an analogous discovery to how we think, how we perceive, how we regard, how we love, how we care for others. But I was having a political conversation with someone the other day, and I said that so much of the core of my antics around my political beliefs is that in the way of someone being loved? I don't care if you're right. I don't care if it works as a policy. We start first and foremost with the obstacles to love, not the promotion of love. That's a whole other kettle of fish. And so often in the identity politics game, we're saying, I'm not getting loved enough. Let's set up the policy so I get the love. No. Let's just set up the policy so that love isn't blocked. And I do mean that. And just so to give it some more gravity with my perception, love is a giving action. Love is about giving. It's really something that can be rather quantified, even if it's mysterious to how it feels. And the feelings we get around love are corollary to that act, to those actionable giving and nurturing, impulses that we as humans have. And so politically, I was explaining, if you're losing me in the political game, just track that idea of what I see as a removal of a blockade of love. So if you see me chasing on a policy or chasing on an idea, it's because I'm seeing a real blockade to love being flowed. And if you see me being like shrugging on a policy, it's probably because I'm like, well, it doesn't fucking matter either way. People can still love each other just fine with this policy. Or it would seem that way. And that's where I would need the education, for someone to illustrate to me the blockade to love. I totally believe that people don't feel love enough. I totally believe people aren't getting enough, or feel like they're not getting enough, or feel like they're depressed. That human condition. You don't need to sell me on this. 100%. Like, I'm bored with that. Of course, everyone needs a little more of whatever in their mind. Got it. I think it's inappropriate to live that way. I don't think it's a fruitful way to perceive your world. But I get that that's how everyone's running around. Okay, got it. But that's what I mean by finding that analogy to help that person maybe see, or helping me as the person who thinks the person is just being greedy, maybe make me see that there's a blockade to getting something really important, or a blockade to loving each other better. I really went off on the reeds on that one. I hope that makes sense. I mean, does it?
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to sort of bring in something that we've mentioned a couple times on the podcast, and our first episode was about this a little bit. But one of the things that's changed for me radically, where, you're talking about sort of...
Yeah, talk to me about your switches. That's what I need. Yeah.
So seeing this small thing that sort of blew up into, wow, all of my behavior is basically centered around this. For me, it came through meditation, and specifically realizing what it's like to be lost in thought by having the contextual experience of not being lost in thought.
Yeah.
When you meditate, that's when you meditate properly.
Oh, what a snut! No, just kidding.
I can go off on that, but that's what you see is basically we've got this default system of sort of, you have a sense, and then your amygdala picks up on it, and you have a reaction, and then you have a thought based on that reaction, and it's this weird cycle of just running around between these three things.
Right.
And there is another way to live. There is another way to perceive your situations that does not require you to be lost in thought. And as soon as I had that experience, at first it was just interesting, and I thought, ooh, meditation feels good because I'm not lost in thought anymore. But it translates into literally everything else you do.
Sure.
And I realized how much of my behavior is just me being thinking without knowing that I'm thinking.
Well, I agree with you, and I think to a lot of what you said, I'm going to totally chase you down on the sort of this person's maybe using a broom and getting into a meditative state, and Chase come along saying, "You're doing it wrong. I don't care if you're centered. You're doing it wrong." No, but anyway, your centered is less than my centered. No, but I think that what it is look, my lungs take in air, and they breathe air. And this is not my concept. I'm sure I borrowed this from someone way smarter than me. I'm an idiot. My lungs take in air. They produce carbon dioxide, and my kidneys, remove waste, and they produce urine, and my butt produces poop, and all these organs in my body doing stuff and producing stuff, right? My eyes will see without me choosing. I don't say it's like, now I will see. Nope, it just does it. So all of these organs in the body, without my consent, permission, or even interest, continue. The brain's an organ. What does it do? It produces thoughts. It's, this might be a little Alan Wattsy, but roll with me, kids.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a thought producer. Just starts. It's thoughting. It's thoughting. And that's from another teacher I know I borrowed that word, so you guys can, don't check my references. I'll seem smarter if you don't. But yeah, like the brain just produces thoughts. Now, in the same way that every poop I do, I don't then hold on to and say, oh, this is my poop, so I better hang on to this poop, because pretty much soon I'll be covered in shit, literally. But yet we do this with our thoughts. And the brain keeps producing them. And instead of dismissing them, as we do with the poop in the toilet, we hang on to them or build on them, without forgetting that the brain is going to produce more of them. We don't need to hang on to any one of them. If you don't believe me, think of the day you really, really, really were dying for orange sherbet. And you're like, oh my God, it's a hot day. I just want orange sherbet. God, I want to go get some. And it's like, maybe tonight I'll go for it because I really want that orange sherbet. And maybe a smoothie. No, I got to get orange sherbet. And it's like noon. It's orange sherbet. And then maybe you get out of work, like, I'm gonna go to the gym, and guess what I'm gonna get? I'm gonna get orange sherbet. And you go to the ice cream store, finally get there, and gonna get your orange sherbet. You walk in, and go, ooh, chocolate chip cookie dough. That sounds good and off like that. within a nanosecond, your brain chose a different thought, and we forget that, barring some sort of mental illness, and this is where I DSM-6'd it, because I think a lot of people unfairly will say that, oh, the people who don't make that switch of thought, they're weak or something. No, there are obstacles. We are all, have a variety of skills and talents, and some of us have disablements across the board, and some of them are in our brain. But for most of us, let's say the main bell curve, it's as easy as choosing that next thought and just dismissing the previous one. If you can change your mind on ice cream, on the color of a carpet, on the shoes that you put on this morning, so too can you quickly change, a thought that's plaguing you, or, oh my God, is she gonna like me? And she gonna talk to, I'm not gonna pay this bill, or whatever weird thing that we think is a precious poop, and totally isn't a precious poop. And that it's funny because, when I talk about all this, like, mind, wisdom, centeredness stuff, it's so self-seeking and so petty and so ridiculously like self-congratulating that when people really linger in it, I'm just like rolling my eyes, because I'm like, you are not giving shit to anyone. You're trying to give the advice that makes you feel good about yourself to go meditate or go do, like, you're absolutely not creating that comedy gap, or that little gap, or that vacuum that might make you see the truth here is I might need to shut the fuck up on how smart my brain is. Maybe that's a possibility. And so it's interesting how that's where I see the culprit of getting caught in our thought the most, is how we regard one another and how we regard the things we do. That maybe I don't need, I'm dealing with a client right now, they're waiting on delivery. He's whining because he literally, the words he said, and if he listens, he's not going to listen. If he listens to this podcast, he's going to be pissed at me. But he says, I think we're going to get fucked over by the producer. And I said, why? He said, well, he said 5 weeks, and it's going to cut it really close to the date that we need this thing. I said, we're not getting fucked over. He's like, yeah, we are, because I want it sooner. I said, how does that make you fucked over, that the person is like sticking with their deadline? Well, he could have pushed it sooner. I said, no, he probably couldn't, which is why he said only. It's a thing you make. Things can be made so quickly. Like, and it was this thing where I had to sort of gently coach this client to the idea that he's stuck in his thought of that relationship to that thing. That because, which it was a ridiculous thing that he thought he was getting fucked over because the guy was going to meet his deadline. But I was amazed at how, wow, this is my thing, to then listen to what he's saying and figure out the vase conundrum. Oh, I got to treat him like a vase for a second and hear what he's saying as a vase before I presume, like, no, I'm so clever. Let me explain sand gelled into glass. Like, no. Sometimes vase, it's a vase. Leave it be a vase for that minute. And if you have the chance, maybe you can find the truth by letting that person feel comfortable holding that vase, or letting that athlete hang on to the idea that he's going to be the next Mr. Olympia, or maybe, letting that client think that their brand is going to be the next great entrepreneurial effort that we see in our capitalist structure, or whatever weird vase we're holding on to, whatever thought model we find so precious. Sometimes the best love is by letting someone hold that vase for a minute. And if they hold it and they're, wow, Christian's being really nice to my vase, maybe I'll let him hold it. And then I'll smash it. Of course, no, I won't necessarily smash it, but it's that idea that like, I won't ever get them to understand that it might be sand if I'm yanking it out of their hands and smashing it. Like, it's just not going to work. That's why, comedy, storytelling, that's why I don't love marketing and branding. It's just a job that my talents kind of neatly fit into. I can do that because it has the essence of narrative, has the essence of like helping people manage what they want things to be, i.e. what is truth versus desire. And these skills I have, it's sort of like, okay, I can work here. I meet other people who are like passionate about like graphic design. I'm looking at them like, what the fuck? You're at a computer, you're passionate. Okay, well, God bless you if that's what you're passionate about. I don't get it, and I do it every day. But that's why I think that in the pursuits I have, I've never done well being like, that's why I said multi-mastery at the top of the show. I've never done well at being just the one cog in the machine. There has to be that, what is the real truth here? So that's, I keep saying and starting the next sentence, which I hate when people do on my podcast. So I got to be more careful with that. And then a new thought. And then you're like editing it and you're like, what the hell was the damn truth in what he was saying? So I'm teeing you guys up for a real big editing fest on this one, guys.
It's all right. We got time.
But that's why I was saying with the, like, what is my acumen or whatever, what was the word you used? I forget. I guess what it is because my work is not, and this is something that hopefully I have a really good rationale behind. Let's see. My work is not like necessarily accredited by any major institution, only because I think what I've been doing falls outside of the existence of said institutions. Like, in other words, I feel like I fringe a lot, and that's true of any, and I hate to be, this sounds so smug, but that's true of any artist, that oftentimes what makes them exceptional may not be something that there is an institution to recognize the exceptional nature of. And so you kind of have to shove Bob Dylan into a Nobel Prize. Does it work? Maybe we can do it, but he did something. We know he did something, and it just doesn't fit neatly, So that's sort of been a lot of my career description, which is baffling for people who know me because they're like, "But you have all this. Where's the accreditation?" And I'm like, I say I'm on the Twain method, which is Samuel Clemens, great, clever, funny writer, mad alcoholic, total philanderer, and kind of a piece of shit most of the time, but an amazing writer. Wrote a book at age around 55, 56. And he's like, I work for newspapers, and if I use my newspaper name, Samuel Clemens, no one's going to read this. I know. And he called himself Mark Twain. And then he was like rewarded for the rest of his life into his old age. But I'm sort of like, I'm taking the Mark Twain method. While everyone's sitting here trying to be a superstar starting from 24 years old on, or 28 years old on, and getting like that whole Silicon Valley, if you haven't made it by 28, you better rethink your whole life bullshit, which is a totally entitled piece of crap. Like, talk about not fitting into the rest of humanity. It's like that attitude is bullshit. Fuck that motivation. You can own it. Like, no, many people build a huge degree of work, skill, talent, and ability, and then they create their greatest. Why would anyone want to be at their greatest at 28? I don't know. Like, what a waste of 70 more years. What a horrible, horrible waste. I mean that literally. What are you going to do? That was your best? Get off the rock. We need your air, food, and water. Get off the fucking rock if that was your best,
So we've talked a lot about how to tread the ground of changing someone else's mind or opening their mind to some idea that they may not be open to.
Right, through analogy. Yeah.
I want to get your sense of how you think about changing your own mind and how you sort of react cognitively when you realize that you may have maybe thought something that wasn't true or your perspective changed on something. And what's your attitude toward that phenomenon in general? Like, is that something that you seek out? Is it something that you just sort of notice when it happens? Is it something you're hostile to?
Well, I mean, fortunately, I'm always right. So,
oh, okay. Well, that's that. Next question.
That's the end of the podcast, folks. We're going off the air. No, but I think, well, there's so many ways to answer that. One of the things is that it has been a conscious practice that I suck at. I mean, if you want to say, Christian, where do you suck? The thing I suck at is catching when I've blundered. Now, everyone's like saying, oh, well, I'm good at that. Oh, all you listeners are full of bullshit because y'all don't catch when you blunder either. So everyone needs to shush and join me on this wagon of self-pity and say, I'm bad at it, but it's something I want. So that's my first thing I'll say is my regard for it is high and vast. And when I see someone say, like, oh, yeah, you're right, I was incorrect, with like a smooth, silky, they don't give a shitness, I'm like, oh, can you adopt me? Like, I'm just fascinated with that level of calmness around being incorrect. Mm-hmm. Because it's only in that calmness that you might be like that much closer to learning because you're like chill about it and you can just get right to the, correct me part. So literally for 20 years, I almost can pinpoint the day when I was 21 that I was like, I have to stop assuming that being right is the good thing. Like the whole, like, you can be right or you can be peaceful, kind of like that whole energy. Like I was so self-humiliated by how consumed I was with getting the answer, so much so that I would often force my brain into an answer. And that's when we end up saying something stupid. And you can hear I talk. I'm a smug son of a bitch. I say this is an affect of my upbringing, not the dialogue I'm actually having in my head, which is a little more humble and, just way more insecure 90% of the time. But I grew up in a house that was full of smug, very authoritative, like aggressively speaking people with great speech patterns and the ability to talk circles around me. And so I adapted this smug delivery method that I really, now that I'm talking about it, I can hear it, but I can't hear it. So when I hear myself recorded, I'm like, you smug son of a bitch, like, shut up, you're wrong. But it's funny, like that's literally the dialogue in my head. Because when I hear something, here's like, for example, one of the things I will tend to do is as a storyteller, if you told me this, like watch this, I'll even do it right here on the spot, magic trick. Chase, tell me the first thing you notice that you can recall about Alex that you're like, that's pretty cool.
The first thing I noticed
about Alex when you met years ago, that you thought, oh, that's pretty cool.
Oh.
You're like, oh, that's like that dude's cool, actually.
Huh. I feel like it was his demeanor of just being like, not to use the same word, but cool. It was his sort of attitude of just, because the first time that we met, and we've told this story on the podcast once before. Yeah. The first time that we met was in the Berkeley bookstore, the ratings auditions week before the semester started, and he was literally the first person I met at Berkeley. But the first thing I noticed where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, I feel like was probably his demeanor.
So let's pretend now I had to tell this story and 30 years had passed. And I only had that one account. I didn't have Alex's, but I had that one account. This is how Christian and my arrogant, smug mind would then tell that story. Not having any friends, this, newly arrived individual at college spent all of his time in the bookstore and completely lonely and yearning for a friend. All it took was somebody, being calm right next to him. Now, the guy was not necessarily cool, but really vibed on being treated like an alpha. And so the two of them quickly bonded, and soon that structure mellowed out into a regular friendship, which is total bullshit. That is not at all what happened. But my brain will grab the facts and then in the effort to try to find a story that really like compels another person, I will embellish and flower and use magic markers all over that thing. And that is wrong. The problem is the story will be so juicy as a storyteller. It's so much more fun that way. Let's face it, my story was way cooler than your story. But like, I will do that on the fly, and that's where I get embarrassed. So my thing is embarrassment. because I know I'm wrong. Like it's bullshit. For example, one of my bajillion part-time jobs is giving tours. And I will take factoids about the city of Boston. And in the effort to create a narrative between seemingly disparate stories, I will wax some fucking tale about, Sam Adams that's just not even fucking true. But it creates a great story, and so off we go, And so when I'm caught at being wrong, it's embarrassed. And oftentimes my defense mechanism is to try to explain what I just explained to you right now, to try to say, yes, I'm wrong, but understand I'm trying to tell a story. So it's a fiction. So it wins the day. Like I try to do that bullshit thing, like writer's license. Like I've used the term writer's license since the day I learned it when I was 15. And, it's that idea, I try to couch it and I'm trying to communicate. And the thing that's important, and this is where I do actually get into trouble, is I've always said it's more important that you understand my point than that my facts be correct. So long as you understand that I'm okay being called out on my facts being incorrect. In the context, the closed context of a conversation. I'm not talking about the big broad world. I'm talking about, if I was talking to you, and Alex knows this, one of my coaching things is what I call dummy science, where I will fuck up some science so heinously and so ridiculously. It's it's almost comically cartoonish, but the concept of what I'm trying to say about your body, you understand. And that in that context is important because now I know, okay, you're going to go forward with that operative knowledge. And I always say, and Alex will also tell you, the way I handle it is I say, be sure to look this up. Check me on this. Go do some research. I'm only trying, I couch it in other words, I'm only trying to get across a point here. The body isn't actually only a tube. I'm just using that analogy so you get it, and it's one of those, the body isn't actually a clock. I have all these sayings and I'm but I use it so you have the understanding of the concept. And so how I deal with being wrong is, if you want my vulnerability, is I get embarrassed. I feel like it's almost a level of shame, because of this weird smug delivery it came out with. It's so much, it's like horrible embarrassment. But the other thing is it triggers something in me. I'm very terrified of not being understood or known. I mean, on an individual level. I don't mean the big world. If I'm forgotten, so be it. But I mean, if you're talking to me and I even think that you might not be perceiving me correctly, a feeling of panic and anxiety comes over me. Because now it's again, to push that truth conundrum. Oh my God, this person is not talking to me. They're talking to some vase version of me. And that's not, I'm sand right now or whatever. I'm using the analogy poor. I'm beating a dead horse here, but you get what I mean. I panic. That's one of the scariest things for me, is to not be seen, figuratively speaking. So in a conversation, if someone says I'm wrong, my bigger concern is that we have a correct dialogue of why and how we're wrong, than even hammering down the exact data that was incorrect. That we have a conversive way of operating around what's wrong. That's my priority in that moment. I'm terrified of that idea of no, the facts are more important than whether or not we're working with each other and teaching each other those facts, which I see a lot of people, most people that I know, are more concerned with that. No, you say the words that I think are right, rather than, wait a minute, let me understand the context that those words came out of your mouth. And maybe I'll be able to then correct your course with that fact, because I know the course at which you arrived at this one. So if I had told you, to go back to put the sort of final point on this, if I told that story and you were standing right next to me and you were like, Christian, you're full of bullshit, and stormed off, it would do nothing for my learning. But if you pumped my brakes and said, oh, I could see why you'd say that. In reality, it's still a little bit embellished, and I can tell that you were just trying to tell a story and keep their attention. The true story is a little bit more boring and a little less, makes me look like a little less of a loser. So here's the real story. And it's sort of that idea of if you identify my context is king in my world, then it's easier to hear that I'm wrong. So when I'm wrong, I start defending my context, even though I tend to be very pliable with the content. It's no, hear my context, then correct my course. And I try to talk to other people that way ask, I've done it with both of you guys. You'll say something, say, where did you get that? Or who told you that? Or how do you come to that? Or what was your background with that? Because I want to make sure I have the context before I come in and say, you know what, you're an idiot. I'll still say you're an idiot. But it's like the idea that I understand where it's coming from so I can talk to you analogously, and there's that word again, to what the truth you are in that moment. Hold your vase for you, with you. And then we can begin breaking it down better. That's something that, is such like a refinement of communication that, like I said, I suck at. I'm still trying to get good at it. But something that, while the joy of teaching for me or the joy of mentoring for me is rarely to see the person accomplish something great, but rather to see the person able to incorporate more into their thinking and able to, a word that Alex has probably heard me use before, resource themselves more broadly. And that's more important to me. If someone has the ability to have more resources and work with more resources, I don't care if they reach their goal, because now this is a higher functioning person, because they can do and create and make more because they're not like stuck in some narrow little thing. It's nerve-wracking when people hear that I'm like, I'm not going to worry about whether you win or lose. I'm not going to worry about whether you make money or not. I'm going to worry about whether you did the best you could and understand your resources, breadth and depth, which usually leads to making money and, winning or whatever. But I take it from the standpoint of, no, better resources, better results. So I'm going to teach you something. I want you to have breadth. I want you to have depth. I want you to have, flexibility at the edges of your breadth and depth.
So I think that experience of having anxiety around sort of seeing that you're wrong is actually a really common experience. I wonder, what's your take on why there's such a stigma about changing your mind?
Well, I mean, let me plumb the last 7,000 years of civilized humanity to figure that one out. Oh, God. I mean, what of the 17,000 answers? In today's world or in general, like as a human creature?
In today's world. And, I guess the reason that I'm asking, and feel free to answer that question, but the reason that I'm asking is,
thank you.
One of the things that I want to ask next is, how do you think, we can work, whether it's, me and Alex on the Switch or all of us collectively or me personally, how can we work, or even our listeners, how can we work toward destigmatizing changing your mind and sort of promote that value of epistemic humility, of saying, well, I didn't understand before, I was wrong, but now I'm more confident in my new answer, or I'm open to new evidence or whatever. How do we promote that as a value?
Well, and because we all agree that humility is the most important thing, like everyone agrees with that, and because of
specifically epistemic humility.
So because we all agree that we all agree with that, and because that's so important, that's why you just recontextualize that so I could understand it, like because I had done that, talked about reframing things in context, and so that's why you did it. I mean, we can all hear that's why you did that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I just did was I just did the exact answer to what I'm about to tell you. Notice how you immediately agreed with me without even hesitating. Like, yeah. So let me give you some things. First off, if listeners rewind, go back 45 seconds and listen to the conversation. Chase asked the question, and then he was hit with, before an answer, a right or wrong, it's this way. I hit him with questions. Curiosity is the number one way to love one another. Now, that may sound like lovey, touchy-feely, but without curiosity, you won't get a relationship, you won't have a good job, you won't. Curiosity, good old garden variety, everyday expendable, over-excessive curiosity. That's why we love dogs and cats. That's why, guinea pigs are more fun than rats. Curiosity. Why wildebeests are more funny to watch than zebras, because goddamn curiosity is what keeps relationships going. And so I showed curiosity. That brought you in. I didn't have a point. I had no ground. I wasn't trying to bring you to my point or negotiate. I just was showing you curiosity. That brought you out to me. That opened you. That simple bit of asking questions. I wanted to make sure I saw you. So I broke you down a little bit. Smash with a few questions. Where's the sand? And you delivered, and you gave me way more information. It was useful to me. My curiosity is rewarded. And meanwhile, you were feeling suddenly more in the flow with me. So you could deliver more information and tell me where you're going. And look at how we started getting in sync. So go back. Now it'll be about a minute 15. Go back and listen to that. That was my first tactic. That's what we need to do, is show each other curiosity. start with questions. I always say 3 than me. If you're having a conversation, 3 than me, you ask 3 questions, then talk about your relatable experiences. 3 than me. It could be 5 than me. I don't give a crap. You can 20 than me. Show endless curiosity. Going back to the beginning of this podcast, that's what one of the things my father taught us through example is he showed curiosity first in order to show love first, because that was his Catholic upbringing, rather than show judgment and whether someone was wrong according to his religious tacits. The primary was that curiosity, because that's going to show the person that I love you first. Before anything else comes out, I love you first. And I'm going to give to you first. So leading with that, it's a very easy thing to sacrifice. But we get so hostile and, like you said, anxious to get our rightness out. But that was thing number 1. Then I pulled a quick, tricky sales tactic. This is not me, but this is a clever trick I've learned along the way. I'm going to hand it to your listeners right now. In negotiation sciences, look, some of what I do is I have to sell stuff. One of my million part-time jobs. And I'm not into sales. Fuck that. But like I have to sell stuff. So I only sell something I believe in. That's me. I can't sell something I don't believe in. And one of the things I learned is that 2 of the most persuasive tools, because everyone agrees that sales is boring, right? Yeah, I just used both of them and you both agreed with me. In a negotiation, one of the most persuasive words in the English language is the word because. And if you can sneak a because in there or a therefore or a so, humans love logic and the brain pricks right up and says, hey, I like what he's saying. So using because, go back now, listeners, go back 2 minutes and listen and you will hear me becausing the shit out of Chase. Now, the second thing, and I always giggle when it works. I'm like, wow, this word is like magic. So use because a lot, and you'll begin to create a simpatico with somebody else. Even if they're disagreeing with you, they'll begin to be simpatico with you, and that's what's important. You can maintain your opposite ideas, but if you use that little like, therefore, because-y language, it's going to make you think in that sort of logical paradigm, as well as sort of soothe the other person's logic thing, and you can suddenly start talking with a little more simpatico. Very important. And then the second thing is, I sound like Trump. Simpatico, very important. The second thing is inclusive language. Now, speaking of Trump, he does use this a lot and he's great at it. Human beings, our natural herding and loving and caring instinct, whatever you want to call it, we love inclusion. Ooh, it's like candy to our brains. So if I phrase something using inclusive language, you'll hear it one way. But if I say, or, we all say that inclusive language is obviously something everybody loves. I just used inclusive language. And suddenly, most people are like, oh, I don't want to not be in the herd. And they'll sort of start jumping on your bandwagon. So you'll see it. It's a tactic in politics frequently used. We this and we that and are this and we're that. And so we don't think of it. But if you go out in the media, you'll start seeing that tactic, the inclusive language tactic. But it does work. It genuinely works. So if I'm dealing with you individually, I try to find a truthful we that we share as opposed to just weeing you for manipulative political advantage, actually trying to find what is, now go back 3 minutes, there's another thing, and you'll hear me talking things that were in the conversation that were not made up, that I was trying to use inclusive language to help Chase then explain himself better to me because I needed to learn. Remember, if you don't know something, you're automatically in the wrong. You're not incorrect, you're just not yet in the right. So if you're not in the right, it's a little bit black and white that you're in the wrong. So it's on you to be curious, ask questions, create simpatico, create rhythm. And I think this is where I'm trying to answer your question, but this is maybe something that we can try to do. Make our measure about simpatico, make our measure about how we connect, how we communicate, how we operate, and have that be our priority. And say, fuck you, data-driven world. There's plenty of time and room for all the data. Plenty of time for it. And plenty of time and room for all the rights and everything that's correct and tracking it and making sure we get in all the check boxes and all the perfectionism. There is so much time and room. And so that's not a resource we have to sweat, being right. The resource we have to sweat is the context, which is the analogy, the gap, the humor, the context is our value. That's why I set it up as a team with Alex. And that's why even with you guys, I'm doing a lot of the talking, but I want to be on your podcast doing your thing, not talking my thing, And that's the switch that we could make. That's that's where it's at, is figuring out, how do I create and recreate and adjust my contexts rather than stick to my beliefs and have others repeat back to me my beliefs, or see my beliefs executed before me in the world around me, which is what so many people, like, for example, people approach music this way. They want everyone to love their songs, and God forbid you interpret their song wrong. No, it's supposed to be this. Well, who says? I'm dancing to it my way, up yours. Fuck you, Bob Dylan. I think you're a sucky singer. Wah. Take your Nobel Prize and go home. Yeah. But yeah, you see what I mean? Like, it's a contextual thing. And so I'm using all the words because I don't want to pin it down to one word. I'm using simpatico, context, but it all stems from that curiosity. If we can prioritize curiosity over the need to hear truth, because when we're like looking for an answer, or we want the answer, I want to hear truth, versus curiosity just says, I want to investigate truth. What's more? Give me more. Like, it's open to questions at that point. And that's a small shift. And it, like I said, I suck at it. It takes training. It's something that you have to constantly remember. And the one thing the human brain does better than any other animal, and better than anything else, the best thing the human brain does is forget. I mean, God, if anything is designed to lose data and information, it's the human mind. Oh my God. Everyone talks about, the human brain is great at this and that and the other. No, it's built to forget shit. I mean, dog, you turn on the vacuum cleaner, the dog jumps a mile. Every time you even step near the vacuum, the dog starts freaking out. Human beings, you scare a baby with a vacuum, the next time you turn it on, it wants to play with the thing. Idiot! You know the devil lives in the vacuum. The dog showed you. Why do you forget that? No, but seriously, like, the human brain forgets everything. And so that's why people with memory are so fascinating. And we sometimes overpraise the people who are smart rather than pay attention to the people who are intelligent or wise. Because smart, in my estimation, is the ability to store information. Intelligent is the ability to create information. Wise is the ability to apply information. I add a fourth one in that say bright people can just talk about the information, and sometimes they're dumb, no intelligence, and not wise at all. But man, can they talk about the information. And it's sort of my personal 4 states of like mind skill. And we tend to lean on smart. And even children in school are taught to be smart, to store that information. Like, because that's going to make you a doctor, so it's like this smart thing. Don't laugh. And so I think that we don't worry too much about intelligence. How do we create information? Get curious. Or wisdom. How do I use it? Get curious. Now, so you got to be a little curious to be smart, sure. Like, give me more information. But that's really teaching us to be in that right, wrong, hang on to what's right conundrum. This is the right thing to do. Above all else. I'm not saying don't have conviction. I'm not saying don't have of course we must, because without that, how do we estimate anything? I'm just saying, if you're asking me, how do we create, a better way of operating and switch our tactics for being corrected, for, gaining ground with our own information, I do think that curiosity piece is very undervalued and very vital. And we have literally set up technological machinations to deteriorate and even discourage curiosity. How do you find a girlfriend? You swipe until you find her. You don't go curious and go out into the world. You swipe and you sit there and you do not get curious beyond this limited context. That's a really tedious and stupid example, but that's the idea, is that curiosity is kind of taught out of us, because if you're not curious, you don't ask me questions. And if you don't ask me questions, I can convince you I'm right. And if I can convince you I'm right, well, I got something to sell you, kid. And it's really, I hate to go political, but I do see it, if not a conspiracy of the capitalistic mindset, certainly an unfortunate offshoot that curiosity gets tamped down in a pro-capitalist energy, that it really gets shoved aside, because you don't want a smart fucking client. You want a dope, and then you can sell them everything and you make your money, and then everyone tells you you're the best because you have all the stuffs, and you did it, kid. And then we all relate to that, of course, inclusive language. And so the curiosity is the piece that I think that I would like to see people, and I mean across all boards. What kind of all kinds? Start with questions. 3 than me. That's why I made up 3 than me, so I can remember it easily. 3 than me. ask him at least 3 questions before you start telling him yours. If you recorded the initial thing when we got on, you would have seen like 10 questions. We're so afraid to use questions these days.
I think that's one of the things you mentioned. Like inclusion is something that everybody wants. And with the team, you set it up in a way that we were included enough that then we were comfortable enough to be curious.
Sure. So I do think, yeah, you're right. The environment, has a lot to do with it.
Right.
Which is why I'm saying the opposite is also happening right now in our society. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially like you mentioned in the capitalist system, it seems to sometimes push people in opposite directions, right? The more curious and intelligent you are, the more successful you'll be, but you need all the rest of the people to not be that way.
And it's interesting. So there are entire models of quote unquote success. I say quote unquote because they're based on finance, but of quote success that are entirely based on literally not being curious, but just holding to one narrow set of information or tacits. Just do these things and you'll be a success. And it's more about obedience at that point rather than curiosity, which is creepy. Utterly creepy.
And that's one of the... Yeah, and I feel like that's what I got that do this way forever onward in school, growing up. And what you helped us with the next level was something that I had never seen from somebody who's a teacher or a mentor, maybe from people around me, like Chase, or people that you have conversations with, like a peer group. But there was never somebody who was a guiding figure, because it seems like in a lot of these types of relationships where somebody is above another person, they hold on to the high ground, and it's trying to show, I know this, I know that. And it doesn't seem like you ever really did that. You fostered curiosity and let us kind of go at it.
And that's what I'm saying is that for me, in power dynamics, the power that I had, I always joked, I was a gardener. So my power, you'd only see me power dynamic when I was protecting the garden. Otherwise, what's happening in the garden? These are plants. I'm not like going to yell at the seed to come out of the ground. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just, I just have to weed it and tend to it. And that's where the power dynamic comes in, is, understanding that my quote unquote authority was actually based on creating the safe space, creating the boundaries of the space within which it could be boundaryless thinking, which I know that's sort of an oxymoron, but yeah, it's one of those things. Like for example, when I met with you guys with Mojo Filter, one of the things I don't know if you remember that one of the things I was asking you millions of questions, and you guys came to me knowing exactly quote unquote what you wanted. But my first job was to make sure that you knew all the resources and what was around you before you said you knew what you wanted. And Chase is very curious. He's naturally curious. So, I was talking Chase's language. But that was the thing, is it's that idea that, I'll always not know something. And it's that environment of, the peer context that really, that's where I've always learned the most, is when I don't want to say challenged, but when I'm, like bumping off of people fearlessly, boldly bumping off of people. I don't understand most models of success that we have promoted out there. This idea that there is that we all must be the next great social media influencer, and that we all must be the next great millionaire. And, so many of the things that I see people say they want, and this is true of my upbringing. Remember, I was sort of, like I said at the top of the show, sort of a gilded little upbringing. Now there are things that I say, oh, I remember that little comfort, and I liked that. And then I pause and I think, I haven't craved that little comfort in years. So I remember liking it, but I don't care. I was like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Not because I've chosen to be so like ethereal and monastic, but just because it's like, wow, I was just buying into what they told me because they were right. The authority, there can only be one authority, and that authority, is, like you said, constantly paranoid of any other authority. And they have to, to be an authority means to be number one, and means I have to undermine contrary authority in order to maintain my authority, as much as I have to promote my authority. And it's a whole exhausting process. I think that within limited contexts, authorities are vital components to socializing. Who has the knowledge, who has the rules, all these things. That's super important. But when we consolidate authority into one mind, humanity has shown us that's a really bad idea. It becomes tyrannical, it becomes dangerous. For one person, a figurehead of authority is very dangerous stuff, which is why authority is best left in structures, not in people. So if I'm concerned about being right, I'm basically saying, I am the figure, I'm the authority, I'm the great guru, and I'm the king, I'm the boss. And it's like a spaceman. I could put on an astronaut suit and go out in space and say, look at me, I'm a spaceman, and floating around and, what's up, Sandra Bullock, and floating around and doing all this stuff. And where that reference came from, I don't know. But anyway, I'm in a spacesuit, and then I come back down to Earth and I have the spacesuit on. I say, I'm a spaceman. You look at me like, no, you're an asshole. Out in space, I was the spaceman because I had the suit on. But then to just, every time I put on the suit, say that thus makes me this is idiotic. So when someone is like the boss at a job, or a teacher in a classroom, or a politician in public service, and they say, I am the blank, and they believe it walking around, they believe it of themselves, they're going to start saying that they are the authority. And they're going to tamp down curiosity because that's a challenge to authority. That's why I said it's really important to understand that the structure needs to be where we locate our authorities, which is why it's good to have like a schedule or a to-do list or a journal or other places to extricate your personal authorities, because then you're going to train your brain to not, quote unquote, be the authority. And you're going to actually, just be curious, because the authority's over there. And now I have room to think this through or be flexible. And I think where a lot of people get anxious, not most, remember, DSM-6, I'm very comfortable with mental disorder, but where a lot of people get casually anxious is that they presume they must hold their own authority. And I mean in their little personal private lives. Like they must hold the schedule in their head. Or, for example, Alex will understand this in terms of, like, say, weightlifting. That I don't write things down. I got it all in my head. I don't write down my diet. I got it all in my head. Like and it sounds like a casual, like, I'm so smart thing. And remember, we're praised in our society for being smart. But what they don't realize they're doing is they're cornering themselves into being the authority. And by being the authority, you must be right. And that's a hell of a lot of stress, as opposed to, like, dislodging it into a structure and letting that structure be your authority. You groom it, you change it as need be via the curiosity, but you have the space in your brain to be curious enough to know when it needs changing. When we look at, say, how school is supposed to work, it's supposed to be, you have classes, you have grades, you have everything, because all this, like, external structure to the individuals. So when a teacher starts stepping up or a dean starts stepping up to own that bitch, things get a little less educationally, and they get a little more, like, systematic and weird, and it gets bizarre, it gets bonkers, when a teacher is, like, bossy in their own classroom, or when a boss at a job is, like, when a manager is trying to be like, I don't like how you're sitting, levels of, like, well, what the hell? You know what I mean? I'm just obeying you gave me the company rule book. I have a client who I keep pushing. He's running a business, doesn't have a business plan. He's like, I don't need a business plan. The business is already up and running. I said, are you sure? He's trying to be his own authority, trying to be your own number one. No, get that out of your head so you can have the curiosity of how to grow your business and how to create expansion and develop your business. I mean, that's what my day job is business development, design, creative services. And I'm like, why are you trying to be the authority here? Like, the authority should be on some piece of paper, that you have a relationship with, that you are curious to whether it's going to work, not obedient to this rule that you have in your head. So obedience is one of the worst things for creativity. I believe in discipline. I believe that you must have obedience in a limited context. So, for example, if I'm in the bank, I stand at the end of the line and just go charging forward. I'll be obedient. But obedience is like a temporary thing. It's a tool we use. We should never have a system of obedience. You don't really need a system of obedience. You need a system of discipline.
I think I was going to say the distinction between discipline and obedience is really important for that.
I agree.
And the difference between imposed discipline and self-discipline.
Sure. I agree. Precisely. Yeah. I mean, and what do you see as, like, the sort of, I don't want to say like etymological, but I'll say etymological difference between the two.
Well, so
Like the essence.
yeah. So obedience would basically be deference to authority. You
Okay.
have some sort of
I
authoritative
agree.
figure, whether it's a person or a document or whatever,
Right.
that you basically just default to rather than making a decision.
Sure.
Discipline would be making a decision based on some sort of goal, and usually discipline means making a decision that's more meaningful toward that goal, but that might not be the easiest decision.
My 7 years of Latin just take me back to the roots all the time. And we all know that at Discipulus, the student,
Yeah.
and our students were regarded differently in Latin, that students were expected to model behavior as much as learn facts. So if we go back to that essence of not just that it means student and not just that it means learning, but like the people who decided it meant that and what they thought of that. And we sort of look at this idea of, okay, I have to use a sort of student-like modeling of behavior against maybe an authority or a rule set or an idea or a concept or a philosophy or whatever. But I have to be student-like about it, meaning alert and learning. And that's where the idea that discipline feels strict. And sometimes it is pretty strict, but it's that idea that it's like, this is like a dialogue-ish kind of thing to get my goal met, to get my thing done, as opposed to a strictness, which is like no variance, just keep doing it. Oh, who cares if you knocked it down, keep going, And I think that obedience lacks the curiosity that maybe being a disciple does, or just use that word intentionally.
Yeah.
Being disciplined, I can still conjure curiosity and course correct while I'm being disciplined.
Yeah.
Whereas obedience is like, there ain't no course correction here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just doing the thing you're told to do.
Yeah.
And I really do think that that's what, like, in my work, that's what I'm really trying to get done in so many things. Like my own podcast, The Big Inside, and I'll have you guys on. Like this is a lock now. We're in hiatus. We're coming back. I have to tell you my computer story when we're off the air. This audience does not want to hear the computer story, but and The Big Inside, what I try to do is locate the narrative and exploit it. And then I create an analogy to cause curiosity. So I'll take something, and I keep using that little tiny world of strength sports, which most people, 99% of people, have no relationship at all. And I find the analogous thing to the real world and then tell that story. It's amazing how it's everywhere. And I do that not because I want people to be curious about strength sports, or because I want strength sports people to engage the real world, or because I'm trying to be clever and show how I can be so, histrionic with strength sports, but rather to literally tickle people's brains into thinking of their own narratives and how they can pull out analogies and then apply them elsewhere in a disciplined fashion. Like if I look at the big picture, so you get it now. That's why it's The Big Inside. There it is.
No. I get why it matters whether a hot dog is a sandwich.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with it, but it has everything to do with it. Exactly.
For anybody who didn't get that, that's a reference to
an episode.
The episode. Yeah.
One of the most beloved episodes. I got to do another one of those. But no, so I do think that on The Big Inside, I'm trying to get people to get curious as to the tidbits and the nooks and crannies of their own stories. And by using something as unlikely as bodybuilding, powerlifting, gym bros, something as unlikely and often resented as that, and then pulling out weird meanings like you're dieting and you're whatnot, and pulling out other meanings beyond health and fitness stuff. I'm hoping to get people to think like, whoa, I can maybe, like my litmus test for that is not whether the bodybuilders get it. It's whether, like I always joke, if my mom or my cousin would listen to it and totally be engaged, I've done a good job. I'm really, I want there to be a sharing of perspective, and a breadth of it.
I feel like we could continue on this topic for another, 2 hours, but
Sure.
I do want to make sure that we sort of get to the root point of our conversation in a manner that, is absorbable by people.
So you were one of the people that we talked to first when we thought about the idea for the podcast. And you really helped us to kind of clarify the ideas we had and that it was a theme. And I think one of the things we're talking about here is like, how do we get people to change their minds?
I want to reframe that because my goal with this podcast is not to get anybody to change their minds. I'm not interested in that at all. What I'm interested in is examining the process of reframing perspectives or the process of mind changing. I'm not evangelizing any particular mindset switch.
Sure.
When we talk to our guests, like I've had plenty of disagreements with our particular guests. What I'm actually trying to focus on is that idea that it's important to be open to changing your mind. And if people are not, we're going back to that term, epistemic humility. If we don't cultivate a culture of epistemic humility and start by modeling that behavior ourselves, I think that culture will go in a bad direction. And I know, for me, the biggest thing is to just start by modeling it. Start by trying to show, like I said, that changing your mind is not a bad thing and that it's important to be open to new ideas. It's important to examine ideas on their own terms for whatever they're worth and get out of them what you can.
I mean, if I could summarize everything I just said into that context, what I would say is that a disciplined practice of encouraging curiosity is going to leave you open to it without, like you said, forcing yourself into a mind change.
Yeah.
And I do mean each one of those words very aggressively, that it must be disciplined, meaning you're doing it all the time. It's consistent, it's regular, it's personal, and it must be relevant to you. In other words, you have to recall that. It's something you really have to be doing. And it has to be a practice, meaning make it about how you talk, make it about how you write, make it about how you organize. A practice of curiosity, meaning it's a questioning thing, not questioning to get an answer, but questioning to broaden the perspective on that thing. And you might hit dead, you typically will get rewarded with exactly what you thought to begin with. But that practice is what I think speaks, this is from my teaching and my professional acumen as a designer, as an artist, as a writer, as a coach, as a entertainer, as everything, follows that pretty aggressively. And I would love if that even triggered any thought in any other human being. If it doesn't, so what? I'm, whatever. I'm a weirdo. But like to address what you're saying correctly, that would be my summary. It's like to take up a practice, an aggressive practice of curiosity, a disciplined and aggressive practice. And that discipline is really key there. That's going to leave you open to the potential of changing your mind without feeling that weird anxiety, like I'm wrong. You know what I mean? The wrongness will sneak through of its own accord. And it's what I call the apple cart analogy. If I'm going through I don't have to throw out a single bad apple if I keep putting new apples in the wagon. Just leave the back of the wagon open. The bad ones will fall out the back. Just keep picking and throwing. The bad ones will fall out the back. And it's like that is, I think that so many people want to close the back of the wagon and have their apples.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a tedious analogy. It's a dumb analogy, but just how I visualize information coming in and out of my brain.
Sure.
The constant curiosity of the next apple I pick, disciplined enough to stay on the apple, like stay in the orchard and go through the thing, but not being stupid enough to try to contain all the apples because they will rot faster.
Yeah.
Leave the back open. And so it's aggressive and disciplined practice of curiosity. That if anything of why is Christian, this weirdo who helped evolve Mojo Filter, who helped evolve, bodybuilding, who helped coach, Chase with all of his rucking or whatever the hell he's doing, who helped, give birth to the Switch, who's this weird, oracle of creativity that you touch with every 8 to 12 months. What is his relationship to this silly little podcast? Well, he's constantly and aggressively trying to encourage us toward the discipline of practicing our curiosity toward the very things that we thought we already knew. Now, that was probably one of the most arrogant fucking things that's ever come out of my mouth. And that's saying a lot because I am an arrogant fuck. But that might be the summary of how I'm here and why I'm here and why my practice and my acumens the 17 different things I'm working on right now, sort of feed into this podcast, as opposed to it coming from one epistemology. It's actually the very fact that I am living a practice of curiosity across many fields.
Yeah,
is exactly the reason.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully put, and that's a good way to close. Like I said, I think that we could go on with this topic for another 2-3 hours, and maybe we will at some point.
Yeah.
But for the sake of time, I do want to go ahead and transition to a segment we like to call the off topic. So
now that I have my blurb that I can add to the podcast description, let's move on. Thanks, Christian, for 2 hours of mind pump.
The off topic, as you know, is sort of your chance to present some idea. It could be some philosophical idea. It could be, I always like to say, it could be something somebody said to you at the grocery store the other day that you thought was interesting. It could be the people honking outside my apartment.
Not them.
So, Christian, for the off topic, what do you got?
I'm so mad at this because I told you I have like 7 of them, and I have to pick one, and that's the problem. And you want it to be all deep and meaningful, and then you also want it to just be flip and interesting because that's part of the show. So, so much of what I said in this podcast, I was sneaking in the things that were on my mind. So I kind of satisfied a lot of my thing. One of the things I think that I wanted to talk about, which is coming up a lot for me, is find out your random history of things that you're utterly not interested in. I don't mean find out the history of things that you are interested in. Things that you think you know or you otherwise don't care about. Find out that history. And I mean like to the iota, the personal history. The reason I say that is because recently I've had to explain to people a phenomena that most people didn't even know, which baffled me. And I won't make the story long, but just so you know, Provincetown, Massachusetts, on the tip of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Cape Cod is the peninsula for people who are from other parts of the country. And it's called Cape Cod. And the very end of it is a town called Provincetown. And explaining to a shitty New Yorker the importance of this little nugget of town, really made me conjure up how often I'm researching the bizarre history of things that I thought I already knew. Provincetown gets its name because it was called the Province Lands. Maritime law, as we know, is not sovereign to any nation. When you're floating in a boat, you can do different things than you can do on land. And everyone knows this, and this has always been true. And during the 1500s, 1600s, it was very true. Like what you did on the boat didn't matter. And this is whatever land you hit, you had to obey those laws. Cape Cod, the edge of Cape Cod was actually considered open sea. Even though it was a peninsula attached to land, they regarded it as the open sea. So therefore, it was maritime law. Anything goes. It was not sovereign to anyone. There was no taxes. And so pirates and bootleggers and heretics, that's a code word for gays, could all exist there. And wealthy people looking to circumvent the law and mask their taxes, and people making rum, which is a bootlegger, I guess. And all different weirdos and artists and bizarre people could hole up there. And we're talking not recently. We're talking like 1600s, 1700s. We're not talking recent times. So it became a land of freaks and weirdos and drunks and prostitutes and hookers and wealthy people and, smugglers and all kinds of things. Once that was absorbed, that tradition didn't end. And something happened. Look, one of the most permeable places for immigration in America is Cape Cod. And many capes up and down the seaboard, North Carolina and Maine. There are these places where immigrants can pull up in a boat. No one's going to stop them. And I'm not even kidding you. You can just schlup onto shore on a boat if you can get there. And up and down the sea coast, we've been traveling this for 600 years. We know how to get around. People forget that. So Provincetown the Cape has often been a sneaky way. I hope I'm not getting ice on this because fuck ice, for immigrants to get in. Now, this history that I'm telling you is like you have a poor immigrant class coming in to a freak zone to create a fishing village full of artists, weirdos, people who live outside the law. And it evolves, and now it's like a tourist destination, and everyone knows it as the gay tourist destination, but it's for everybody. And something happens there. Your sexual identity is absent. Not that it's about you have to identify yourself as straight. What you identify as is actually irrelevant, which is freakish for heterosexuals, because you didn't realize how much you were clinging to it till people say, I don't care. And you're like, no, but I must be a heterosexual. No, well, I don't give a shit. And people freak out. Because if no one cares that you're straight, that's a lot more threatening than if someone assumes you're gay. Because now you got no identity. And guess what? How we feel, and it's like a weird phenomenon for straight people to walk around there because they don't get to, like, literally everything their whole personality was built on was just yanked out from underneath for like a weekend. Very bizarre for people to feel. The structures are false. Don't believe the structures. That kind of thing begins to happen. And it's a great time. Here's the point. Globally, queer people do not have any other touchstone other than culture. But actually, we have 400 years of land. 400 years. Gay people on a land. There is no other phenomena in the whole world. When I say hallowed ground, I ain't kidding. This is like the gay nation, the only one. In modern incarnations, you might get a 50, 60, 80-year incarnation. We're talking hundreds of years of peaceful examples that queer people can live utterly self-governing and happy. That label of the province lands, of Provincetown, ain't kidding. And it was something that explaining this history, wow, there's actually a 400-year history of queer people on land, that there's actual tangible land, not just a concept in people's heads. That was really jarring for this littering, obnoxious New Yorker. And he realized he better take care of this place. And the people there who live there year-round are rather poor. And it's not a very wealthy town. And it needs all the external love it can get. And just by revealing the history, it stopped litter. And you thought I was going somewhere very different. But it was only by painting this grand history of how precious this land is that he could understand why he should value it. Study the weird history of things that you thought you already knew. Because he's been going there for years. And he had never heard this history. And it changed his perspective and his value. And the poor people living in this town need that. And it was like a whole cascading effect just by researching the weird history. Whether it's a bookshelf, whether it's a couch, whether it's a street. Like, you're literally the street you live on right now. Go research its weird history. How far back can you go? When was your town founded? When did it become part of the Union? These kinds of weird little histories. Were Native Americans killed on your land? These kinds of weird histories might reveal other histories that you never saw coming. So that's my little, what's it called? The sideline, the hoo-ha, what's it called?
Off topic.
The off topic. Research your weird history, your deep history, and you'll be surprised at what you found about your relevant present day needs. It's incredible. Is that enough off topic for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You thought I was going to talk about gay people. I was talking about litter. You goof. Same difference. It's all trash. Okay, we're back on the comedy jokes, folks.
All right. Well, Alex, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Engage and PR voice. Go ahead.
No, I think it's that's another one of those things, another place to be curious that people might not be. So, I mean,
weird history.
Yeah. I don't got anything else.
Well, Christian, it's been awesome talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to doing an episode of your podcast and having you back on the Switch, because I think we definitely have more to talk about. If people like the way you think or are interested in following up or are looking for places to see your work and what you do, go ahead and tell them where they can find you.
Get ready, folks. Here comes the plugs. Listen, I'm everywhere. So I think that if you see me professionally, you go to scorpiocreative.com. Scorpiocreative.com. SCORPIOCREATIVE. I've done it so many times, I can spell it. Scorpiocreative.com. I'm basically a brand designer, brand manager. That's not the primary creative stuff, but that's basically my businessy thing. If you want to see something a little bit more creative, go to thebiginside.com. That's my podcast, thebiginside.com. Include the. Easy peasy. Like I said, we do them in spurts. We're about to start our next spurt. We don't call them seasons. We call them spurts. And that would be the next thing. Instagram, you can gladly find me at Christian_AKA_XN. In fact, XN, xylophone noodle, XN, that has been my nickname since I was 13 years old. It's like Christmas, Xmas, XN. So I've had that forever. So XN is often a sneaky way to find me, or AKA XN is a sneaky way to find me out in the world. There's a lot of other projects that I'm part of. If you want to look at the past, then you can go to the next level _teams on Instagram. Hasn't been a lot of posts in the past year, but you can take a look at past work and see Alex Berner being all muscly. But I'd basically say those would be the main ways, scorpiocreative.com, and then on Instagram, Christian_AKA_XN. And most importantly, thebiginside.com. All of those have other ways to catch me, so you can certainly look at all of those. There's other stuff and other ways. Oh, can I make one last plug?
Sure.
Yeah.
Please go to givestrength.net. It's both a client as well as a project I'm working on. Basically, it's a charity that all these lifter, strengthy muscle folks, we basically organize people to raise money on a local level and a grassroots level for grassroots charities, typically cancer and stuff. It sounds like I'm doing a read, doesn't it? I'm totally not. This is off the top of my head. Totally sounds like a read, though. And so it's givestrength.net. It's also online on Instagram as Strength Gives Strength. It's seriously an incredibly noble movement is what we're calling it, but it's a charitable organization that needs as much love as possible. So please go check it out. Get involved. If you even if you don't lift, that's the cool thing about it is it's like everybody in the pool. We mostly like to support, charities around cancer, around children, around families. So it's one of those things that's super do-goody and yum. I'd be remiss without mentioning givestrength.net because it's a huge part. All my clients are now furious at me that I'm not going to mention each of my clients by name, but fuck them. That's not what this is about. All right, Say Sports. There, I did it. Now shut up. DTA Inc. No, just kidding. So yeah, ScorpioCreative.com and thebiginside.com are two of the main ones. And I'd love for you guys to check out my stuff. And please, I'm telling this to every listener, please feel free to contact me. I'm one of the most open people, one of those guys, every question gets answered. I might ditch you if you're annoying, but I will gladly, I love to talk, especially on Instagram, Christian_AKA_XN. Please contact me. Totally open. Anything, whether it's business, whether it's just you're wrong, Christian, and shut up, you hippie fruit. I'm in.
All right. Well,
that sounded like a read.
Great.
I'm really proud of myself. That totally sounded like an ad read. I'm really proud.
I mean, if you write ad reads with the word and stuff in them.
I do. You should see my reads are gorgeous. Listen to thebiginside.com. See what I did? Double plug. All right. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you, Christian, and look forward to our various projects going forward in the future.
And I hope I get to come on here at some point in the future as well. I'd love to.
Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Chase. This was an awesome podcast.